Hi, I'm David Harry, and in this video I'm going to do a step-by-step tutorial on how to convert a cheap dynamic handheld microphone into a really good sounding Electret Condenser microphone which uses a Primo EM172 capsule, all for under £20. Okay, so the point of this tutorial then is to do the most simplest modification possible to create this type of a microphone. And by that, what I mean is, all we're going to be doing is basically replacing the capsule inside the microphone and altering the end of the cable with a different type of jack socket. So that really is the most basic that you can do to do this type of a microphone construction or modification. Now, there's going to be people who will suggest that you can use additional electronic components such as capacitors and resistors and such. And what they would do, they would give the microphone maybe a different impedance or a different sensitivity, or make its voltage slightly variable or something like that. But the thing is, like I say, this is designed for people like myself who don't have that much electronics experience, who just fancy spending £20 to make something like this. Now, in all honesty as well, I've put this microphone up against a number of other mics that I own, and it actually punches way above its own weight. And I'll tell you right now, it is way better than any onboard microphone that I've tried on any of the cameras that I've used it against as well. So basically, it is an awesome microphone. So what I'm going to do is go through the tutorial, and it's very slow and dead easy to follow, because if I could follow it, anyone can follow it. And then the other thing is as well, at the start of it, I'll just go through the component list and where to get the components from. And before I kick into that, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to switch over to one of these microphones before it's being modified, so we can get a good idea of exactly what the difference really is. So this is exactly how the microphone sounds with its original dynamic capsule inside it. And whilst it may not sound that bad for £2, it probably doesn't stack up so well against the Primo. Now, the other thing to bear in mind here as well is that I've deliberately done the introduction indoors inside a typical living room. And that's because I didn't want to cherry pick the acoustic environment to do the initial introduction with the Primo with. And the reason for that is because I want to show the microphone kind of warts and all, as it were. And later on, there will be a couple of examples at the end to see how it sounds like quickly outdoors on a GoPro Hero 6, and then also another different environment indoors. But I will also be following up this tutorial on how to build it with examples of how it works in reality, outside, indoors, vlogging, interviews, all kinds of scenarios. Anyway, so like I say, this is the original capsule, and now what I'm going to do is get into the tutorial. So before I get into the instructions for the build, I'm going to briefly go over the components being used, how much they cost and where they're from. I won't be going into postal charges on this, only because they're going to vary depending upon where you buy them from. Because if you're outside the UK, it's obviously going to cost more money to purchase them than what it would do from the UK. So what I'm going to do is just go over the components, where they're from and how much they cost. So first up, we've got the pulse microphone that we're using for the build. Here, we've got the Primo EM172 capsule. Here is a piece of foam that I've cut out, which what this is for seating the Primo on top of, and then that goes inside the space that we create inside the microphone after we've taken its dynamic capsule out. And then the last thing here is a 3.5mm stereo jack plug, and what that is for is to replace the jack socket or the jack plug on the end of the microphone. So just a little bit more detail about the microphone being used. Now, this was bought from CPC Farnell. Now, all the descriptions for everything that I'm using are going to be in the descriptions below, and the links to them, and again the price, and I'll also put in the descriptions. So don't worry if you miss out on certain things as I'm talking right now. It's all going to be linked in the descriptions. So like I say, This microphone is from CPC Farnell, and what it is, it's just a basic plastic dynamic microphone. Now, as you can see, it's made by Pulse, and it's called a dynamic vocal microphone. Now, on the CPC site, I think they list it as a party mic. But the most important thing for us here is this microphone costs £1.99, including VAT. Okay, so we'll have a quick look inside the box. Now, what it is, the microphone is just, a very, very cheap, bog standard mic. But this suits our purposes really well for doing this particular microphone construction because it keeps the cost down. And plus also, it's got the cable built in, which is very important. Now, right now, I've got to say a big thank you to Nick from micbooster.com because I'd had a little bit of an email conversation with Nick before I started doing this modification because Nick is the person who supplies the Primo capsule. And he'd reminded me that you have to be really careful recommending someone build a microphone with an Electret capsule inside it, because if they use an XLR microphone, there could be an instance where they, kind of plug that into a phantom power supply, in which case it could damage or blow the capsule, because an Electret capsule requires a lot less voltage and current than what a phantom powered, condenser would. So basically what Nick advised was, maybe don't go down the route of an XLR microphone. And he's absolutely right. So in this instance, the reason why I'm using this mic, or the secondary reason, is because you can't blow this up with, a phantom power supply, because you physically cannot put an XLR cable into it. Okay, so that's just a little quick brief on why we're using this microphone. The other thing is, it's got an on-off button here. Now, what you can do if you want, you can basically glue that into the on position. It's what I do because I don't need them switched off. And so basically that microphone will do exactly what we need to do for the purposes of this build. The next component in the list is the Primo EM172 capsule. Now this one, as you can see, it's already been used. I've actually just took this one out of a previous build. Now, when you buy one, if you buy the version with the cables on like this, it's all going to be nice and neat and straight cables. This one's only like this because I've took it out of another microphone. So anyway, I would strongly recommend that you buy the version with the cables already built on, or the cables already soldered onto the capsule. Now this comes from micbooster.com, and this particular one with the cables already pre-soldered costs £15.12. Now the reason why I'm recommending you buy this particular one is because they're very tricky to solder onto the back if you just use a bare, the bare capsule to solder onto. Now, if you've got a lot of experience soldering, and if you've got the right equipment and you can dissipate the heat properly during the soldering process to the capsule, then yeah, maybe you want to get the cheaper version without the cabling. But I would strongly recommend that most people buy the version with the cabling on. And the reason why I say that is because it's very tricky to solder onto there without damaging it. And the people at micbooster.com are professionals. They know exactly what they're doing. And so when they connect these cables to there, they seat that capsule in a proper dedicated heatsink system. And what that does, it dissipates all the heat from the capsule when they're soldering the cabling on. And that's very, very important so that you do not damage the capsule with heat during the soldering process. So like I say, the version with the cabling on costs £15.12, including VAT, and the bare capsule costs £12.60, including VAT. Now there's one other part here that you may want to buy as well, and that's the rubber ring for this, for the capsule. And this is actually purpose built for this particular capsule. And what it does, it seats the capsule in there really snug and tight. Now, the reason why you may want to buy one of these is because when you create the hole in the foam or whatever you're going to use to seat the capsule, if it's a bit rough, this will help to even out the hole as well, and it'll keep the capsule nice and snug and reduce movement. And because it's made of rubber, it'll isolate it a little bit more as well. So that may well be a worthwhile purchase as well. It's not totally necessary, but if you want to buy one, it's £1.14 including VAT. I also use these anyway on the couple that I've built with these capsules. The third component in our list here is a 3.5mm 3-pole jack plug. Quite often these are referred to as stereo, but whether you call it stereo or 3-pole, we're talking about the same thing. 2 of these is going to cost you £1.36 including VAT, again from CPC. Now you may have some of these already and you can just use whatever you've already got, or you may even want to go and buy a metal one. Now whichever one you decide to use, both are going to be fine. In practice, I've never had problems with these ones with plastic on the outside. So as far as RF and stuff like that is concerned, I've never had issues with them on these types of microphones like what we're going to be building. And the fourth and final part of our list, which isn't actually a component, and this is something that we can build up ourselves or at least just cut out, is a piece of foam. And what this foam is for is to actually seat the Primo capsule inside the hole that is left over when we take out the dynamic capsule from the microphone. So basically you just do a rough cut of a piece of foam like this that sits inside the hole, and as long as it sits in there snug and not loose, it's all going to be fine. Now you may actually have another option, or you might have a better idea for something else to isolate the Primo capsule inside the microphone, but if not, this will work perfectly well. And what it is, after I make this little cutout, I then do a slice in the middle, and the reason for that is because later on, when the Primo is actually connected to the cables that exist in the microphone, what we then do, we just open up the slice, put the Primo capsule in there, close it over, and then push that into the microphone. Okay, so now what we're going to do is get into the actual modification. And the first thing we need to do is to desolder the 2 cables that are attached to the dynamic capsule within inside the microphone. So what I'm going to do is open up the microphone by taking off the mesh. Okay, and just whilst we're here as well, hopefully we can see inside the actual mesh here. And as you'll see, there's a little kind of thin piece of foam in there, and that acts as a pop shield, and that's really good. I'll also recommend later on that we actually use a proper foam pop shield on the microphone, especially if you're going to go outdoors with it, or if you're actually going to do any close miking with it as well. Okay, so we'll get that out the way for a second. Now, as you can see here, this is the capsule, and these are the 2 cables that we need to desolder. Now, what it is, all the soldering processes here, I'm not going to show you me desoldering or soldering anything. 2 reasons for that. One is because it's going to just extend this actual tutorial like probably way too longer than I'm probably going to do it. And also, my soldering is pretty bad, and I don't want anyone picking up any bad habits from me. So this is assuming that, you know, people already have a certain ability with soldering. So go ahead and desolder these 2 cables. Okay, so now as you can see, both of the cables are now detached or desoldered from the capsule. So the next thing we need to do is to remove the capsule from the body. Now, this could be a little bit tricky, but in practice, it's not that difficult, to be honest. Now, what you need to do, there's like a stem here, which the capsule is basically glued to. Now, you can sometimes snap these straight off the stem. If not, just use a hacksaw just to cut the stem at the top to pop the capsule off. And don't worry if you damage the stem a little bit in the process. I mean, I actually did a microphone where I totally snapped the entire stem off, And that didn't even cause me a problem either. And that's because we can rebuild that back up with a piece of foam again. So like I showed you earlier on, that piece of foam that we used to seat inside the stem there, even if the stem was totally damaged, you can just make a piece of foam that's the same diameter to go into that hole as well. So like I say, don't worry too much about damaging the end of the stem there or the entire stem, because it's all fixable with some foam anyway. So okay, so go ahead, try seeing if you can actually maybe just snap it off. If not, cut it off with a hacksaw. Okay, so as you can see here, I've removed the capsule. Unfortunately, I couldn't just snap it straight off. So, you know, I just had to hacksaw it off like that. I mean, sometimes they only have a little bit of glue on and sometimes they come off easy. In this instance, for this one, I just hacksawed it off. In fact, here's the other end of the actual microphone capsule. As you can see, it's not pretty, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, as it stands there, that capsule is undamaged. Now, you know, you may want to keep hold of the capsule because you may have a use for it, you know, further down the line at a later date, especially if you like messing around with electronics and like microphones or audio. So maybe it might be of some use to keep to one side. It's not going to be the best sound in the world, but you may have a use for it. So maybe just keep it to one side. Now what we're going to do, we need to get the red cable and the black cable and feed them back through the little tiny hole on the side and pop them out through the center of the stem. Now what it is, inside they might be slightly glued, but it won't be like a very strong glue. So all you have to do, use either a pair of long nose pliers or a pair of tweezers to fish them back through there and pop them out the top. And don't worry about if you got a yank on them or pull them a little bit. If they are glued to the side, you won't damage them and you won't rip them out. The glue will be very light. So go ahead and do that. So now as we can see, the two cables are now coming through the center of the stem. And now we're ready to start soldering the actual Primo capsule onto these two cables. But just before I do that, I'm just going to do a quick polarity test on the cable and just use something to bell it out with. So I'll show you this process as I do it right now, because this is quite important, because this particular microphone isn't actually wired optimally, and I'll show you this in a second. So what I'm going to do now is test for the polarity of the cabling with inside the mic. So what it is, on the jack end of the mic here, the tip here, that's our live. And then this long piece on the outside, this is our shield or our ground, whatever way you want to refer to that. And what should happen, the tip should connect to the red cable and the shielded area here should connect to the black. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try for the tip. So the tip being live should connect here. Now what should be happening right now, the meter should be indicating something with a beep, but it isn't. So now I'll test it with the black. Okay, so as you can hear there, there's a beep. So what that's telling us is that the polarity of the cabling is reversed. Now, under normal circumstances within a monophonic recording system, which is what we're doing, that reverse of polarity shouldn't really interfere with anything. Where it would do is if you had multiple microphones and multiple track recording. So say for instance, if you had two microphones and you were recording stereo and one of them was reversed to the other as far as its wiring and polarity were concerned, you would have phase issues and whatnot. Now, like I say, it's arguable that within a monophonic system or a monophonic microphone and a monophonic recording that won't happen. But because this is also going to be powering as well, and it's a DC powering system, it probably still would work to a degree, but it's not going to be optimal. And, you know, right now, I'm not prepared to kind of break the protocols that I'm used to. So what I'm going to suggest we do is we wire the Primo black to red and red to black, and basically what that will mean is that when it gets to this end, it's going to be in the right polarity for what I would normally use. So what I'm now going to do is go ahead and just show the actual connecting to these cables. So what I'm doing now is setting myself up to do the soldering. And as you can see, what I'm doing, I'm taking the black cable from the Primo and connecting it to the red cable of the microphone. Again, only because the cabling inside the microphone is reversed. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to apply some heat shrink over the solder point. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing for the other two cables. So then I'll go red from the Primo to black on the mic, and then apply some heat shrink to it as well. Now, the reason why I'm putting the heat shrink on is so that it isolates the cabling, or it insulates it. And what that will mean is that they can't touch each other and short out once we put it inside the microphone. Now, if you're not going to use any heat shrink, then just use some insulation tape or something like that. Basically anything that's going to cover them and stop the bare solder points from touching each other from one cable to another. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll come back after I've done it. So as we can see, the two cables are now soldered in place, and I've heat shrunk them as well. So now what I'm going to do is put the cable inside the foam and then sit the Primo on top of it and then push it back down into the neck of the microphone. So I'll get that up there first. So just get the Primo so it's roughly in the middle like that. And then I'll start pushing the cables into the mic. Now inside here as well, there's a fair amount of space, so it'll definitely accommodate all that cable going in, so that won't be a problem. This is just a little fiddly for me right now because I'm trying to show what I'm doing, but this is quite straightforward. And then once we get to this point, just get your foam and start pushing the foam in. Like I said, the foam just needs to make, you know, a nice contact inside. And then just make sure that the Primo's sitting on the end. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to change the microphone position here so you can actually see it properly. So looking top down, we can see that the Primo is sitting nicely on top of this piece of foam. Now, what this is going to do is two things with the foam. It's helping to seat the Primo in place, and also it's going to give it a little bit of acoustic isolation as well. So it'll help a little bit from vibrations through the microphone. Not massively, but you know, every little bit probably helps in this scenario. So like I say, that's job done now with wiring up the capsule, or wiring up the Primo capsule into the body and then surrounding it with this foam. So now all we have to do to finish this end of the microphone is just screw on the mesh again. So let me just throw the mesh over the top. Okay, so that's job done as far as the business end of the microphone is concerned. So what I'm going to do now is get on with replacing the end of the cable. Now that we've sorted out the front end of the microphone, it's time to do the back end of the microphone, as in alter this connection. But before you do that, if you want to make sure that the microphone is actually wired and working correctly up to this point, if you've got a 1/4 inch to 3.5mm jack adapter, you can use one of them to test the microphone. Now don't forget, this is only going to work in a device like a camcorder or any recorder that supplies electric power or plug-in power. And in this particular configuration, because this is a stereo on one end, it's only going to take mono and shove it probably to the left. So you might only hear one side, but at least it'll give you an indication that the wiring and the capsule are all correct. Okay, so let me just take that adapter off. So what we now need to do is to cut off this jack off the end of the cable. So just go ahead and cut the end off there, just close to the end of where the jack is. Now we've cut the jack adapter off the end, what we need to do now is strip back this outer casing of the cable and go back by about 1.5 inches, 2 to 3 centimeters thereabouts. Now, if you haven't got anything proper to strip this down with, just use a Stanley knife or a very sharp knife, being careful not to cut yourself, and also make sure that you don't cut into the cables inside as well. So go ahead and just strip back the outer plastic by about 1.5 inches. So now that we've stripped back the outer casing of the cable, what we will have done is exposed the red and the black cable inside. And then do the same thing with these almost, where you strip them back, but this time you're stripping them back to the copper strands underneath. Now these are multiple copper strands. So the first one I stripped back was the black cable. Now I've tucked that really right the way back down here and then twisted off the copper strands so it creates one strand. Then I've done the same with the red cable, but this time I kind of left that about 1/2 centimetre from the end here up to where the cable starts there, or the copper starts. And the same thing, multi-stranded, just twist it off so we've got two nice clean copper cables. Now what you will have noticed here as well, unfortunately this particular cable isn't shielded. Now if this was a very high quality mic cable, what would happen? The black or the shield would be wound around the center one, which is the live. Unfortunately on this one, with it being such a cheap microphone, the cabling is also quite cheap as well, as in it's not fully shielded. But I've tried it out anyway, and you know, I didn't pick up any weird issues with it like RF or any kind of like electromagnetic stuff. So for, you know, it's a fairly short run cable, so it shouldn't cause too many problems. The other thing I've done as well is I also rebelled out the ends back to the other end of the microphone, and it is actually the exact cabling as what we thought it was, which is reversed. It may have been the fact that internally in the microphone it could have been reversed by the switch, but it wasn't. So we've wired it up correctly at the other end regardless. So now just get on and strip these back like this, and then we'll get on to connecting this to the 3.5mm jack plug. Okay, so now it's time to wire up these two wires to our 3-pole 3.5mm jack. So what we need to do, the red cable needs to connect to both the first and second poles, or the left and the right as they normally would be in a stereo configuration. And then we also need to wire the ground to the outside, the ground. Now what it is, there's a hole in the ground there. As you can see, the little screwdriver's going through it. So basically feed that through that hole, and then once that's in place, you might as well clamp it in using the clamps actually on the jack there. And then what we need to do is connect that through these two holes here, so we're bridging both of them. Now what I find in practice is that if you pinch these closer together and then just feed it through, and it's almost like feeding it just through one eye of a needle almost then. And then it becomes a bit easier to solder it as well. Let's see, in fact, you know what I'll do? I'll set this up now the way I will do it myself, and then I'll do a close-up on it just to show you what I mean, and then I'll get on and solder it after that. Okay, so here's an example of what I was trying to explain. And, you know, this might be good for someone who's like me and not particularly good at soldering, or very inexperienced at soldering. For anybody who knows exactly what they're doing, they don't really need to look at this. This is just something that I find helps me. What you can see here with poles 1 and 2, or these two terminals, I've actually closed them up close together, and then I've just fed the red cable through both at the same time. So it's kind of like just putting it in one then. And then what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put a solder point right between the two cables, and then that just makes a nice bridge for me there. So I'm effectively connecting left and right together. Like I explained earlier on, this is just so that we're recording on both channels at the same time. And then also, if I kind of just turn this around a little bit, what we should be able to see here is that I've fed the black cable under through its own hole there. So it's coming out under the bottom. But also, I've kind of clamped it as well under the actual clamp at the back, so it's making a solid contact. Okay, now I'm only explaining this little bit right now because this is just how I do it. And like I said earlier on, I'm terrible at soldering, so I find that this just helps me. And then once you've actually got your solder points on and you're happy with them, just snip off the excess cable, and then that's job done. Okay, oh, the other thing to bear in mind at this point, make sure you've definitely put the back end of your socket already on this side of the cable. And again, you know, that I might be teaching people to suck eggs here, but the amount of times that I've not done that and I've had to desolder and start again. Okay, so go ahead and do all that stuff, and then we'll just have a look at the finished product at the end. Okay, so there we have it. There is our newly modified Electret Condenser handheld microphone using a Primo EM172 omni-directional Electret Condenser capsule. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to go to an end summary using this microphone. Although the intro that I'd done to this video was also on this exact mic, because what it is, the intro was actually recorded after I built the microphone. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to carry on with the microphone, do an end summary, and I'll try and do a really quick test with it on a GoPro 6 as well. So this is now an example of the microphone on a GoPro 6 outdoors. So basically what I've done, I've got it plugged into the GoPro 6's external mic adapter, and then that plugs into the GoPro. And then what happens is the GoPro through the mic adapter is powering the capsule on the microphone. So this is just a quick example, but check back in the future because I'm going to be doing a full-blown video all about the GoPro 6 and this microphone. So this is now just a quick example of how the microphone sounds indoors on a Sony AX100 camcorder, and this should give us an idea of typically how it will sound on most camcorders, DSLRs, or in fact any device that records audio via a 3.5mm jack input that can send plug-in power or electric power back down to the capsule, as my camera obviously is doing. Now what I'm going to do is keep this dead short because I'm not going to keep rambling on and going into more demonstrations of the mic, because this video was really just to show how to actually modify and do the whole build process. What I will be doing though is a ton of other videos quite specifically with this microphone on different types of cameras, maybe GoPros and whatnot, maybe external recording devices, but more importantly in different scenarios and different environments, just to see what we can use it for. I mean, immediately you can see right now this is perfect for, you know, for doing vlogging and stuff, although I will be, you know, doing certain like tests with it for interview scenarios and things like that. So anyway, call back or even like consider subscribing to my channel and keep up to date with all that stuff. Anyways, I hope this video has been informative and helpful and whatnot, and it just remains for me to say thank you very much for watching the video. Take care and goodbye now.